Barbara, was Ann Belant on?
Yes, yes. Yes, Ann Belant, Nina Jecker-Byrne, Michelle Woods, Lucian Mott.
Saw Nina in the waiting room.
Mhm.
Maybe somebody got her. And Amanda Merritt's in the waiting room, and she's also on the UP Executive Committee.
Oh, Amanda Merritt, I don't have a full list.
Right, we just got the three
Beth Wilson
names.
and Edward Felton. I have Beth Wilson, Edward Felton. Now I have Kevin Saunders, and you say who else?
Amanda Merritt.
Okay. I'll ask if there's anyone I'm overlooking, and hopefully people will speak up if I've missed anyone.
Michelle.
Mike, I don't see the list of people waiting to join growing. I'm wondering if we should admit them and begin.
Sure. Okay. Sounds great.
That sound right, Barbara?
That sounds right.
Are we rolling, Mike?
Yep, we are rolling.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us for this roundtable discussion on work-life balance, something that seems to be pretty difficult difficult to achieve and sustain in these times. I know how hard this is for so many of our employees and our students. And our purpose here today is to talk about some of the issues at hand and brainstorm about possible solutions. I'll offer just some very brief introductory comments before I switch over to our primary mode for the afternoon, which is to listen. And I'll turn the next stage over to Provost Lyman. We have a couple faculty here today who will speak to some of the issues. We've asked them to offer a brief summary of some of the key issues that they're either experiencing or aware of. And then we have representatives of other groups or entities, parts of the institution who have some purview or some stake in the issues at hand. And that includes faculty governance, UUP, and certainly the administration. We've also asked representatives of our Employee Assistance Program, EAP, to be here today as well to help identify resources that might be available to help address some of the issues at hand and that may be underutilized. So again, our primary purpose here today is to listen. I hope we can hear not only about issues at hand, but also ideas that employees may have about how to address some of those issues. So with that, I'm going to turn the program over to Provost Lyman.
Thank you, President Christian, and good afternoon. And again, welcome to our campus forum on work-life balance, prompted in part by the recent letter from faculty. I think there were faculty and staff co-signers. And the title of that letter, as you may recall, is No End in Sight, Caregivers in Crisis Under COVID. I would like to go on now to introduce a number of participants, including members of the Faculty Governance Executive Committee, UUP Executive Committee, and the Employee Assistance Program. With us this afternoon from Faculty Governance are, at least he will be with us from 2 to 3. We will have Rennie Scott Childress, Presiding Officer of the Faculty Senate. Other Executive Committee members who are joining us are Ann Ballant, Nina Jecker-Byrne, Michelle Woods, and Lucian Mott. Lucian will be with us from 1 to 2. And not able to attend are Kevin Caskey and Sarah Wyman. UUP Executive Committee members who are joining us include Beth Wilson, local UUP chapter president, as well as Edward Felton, UUP professional delegate. We also have from the executive committee that I'm aware of, Kevin Saunders, as well as Amanda Merritt. We have campus representatives for EAP, the Employee Assistance Program. And one of those individuals is Lee Degnan, who serves as campus coordinator, and Avram Segal, who also serves as campus coordinator of EAP, the Employee Assistance Program. We're also joined by the 2 lead authors of the recent faculty letter, whom we will hear from shortly when they provide a brief overview. They are faculty members Melissa Yang Rock, Associate Professor of Geography and Affiliate Faculty in WGSS and Asian Studies. And we also have Meg Devlin O'Sullivan, Associate Professor of History and WGSS. We're also joined, as President Christian has alluded to today, by various campus and academic administrators, including President's Cabinet, and we're also joined by the academic deans. And what I would like to do right now is just ask if I've missed anyone on faculty governance, UUP Executive Committee, or representing EAP. All right, that's not a very long pause, but I'm not hearing from anyone. And so what I'd like to do now is to go on and provide a bit of framing for our forum. So in just a moment, our colleagues, Melissa and Meg, will offer a brief summary of the core challenges faced by faculty and staff regarding work-life balance that were featured in the faculty letter, No End in Sight, Caregivers in Crisis under COVID. We're hoping to have a rich conversation today at this forum that will allow our community and its members to tell their stories and share ideas, call attention to resources that may or may not be known or as well known as they should be, explore possible solutions for the challenges raised, and discuss where they may exist some constraints we face in meeting all of the needs that may be identified and discussed today. We especially encourage faculty and staff to share strategies that have been found to help, and our participants from UUP, faculty governance, and EAP representatives are here also to listen, and they are welcomed to contribute to the conversation. And now, Tahina Pacheco-Dunn will monitor, I want to let you know that Tahina Pacheco-Dunn will monitor the chat for questions or comments, and she will now share a few ground rules for our discussion. Tahina, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Barbara. Good afternoon to everybody joining us today for what I hope will be a good discussion, but on a very important topic. I want to offer just a few ground rules, if you will, just so that we can have the conversation move along and be productive, and we can hear from as many voices as possible. We ask those with questions or comments or suggestions to raise their hand using the raise their hand feature in Zoom. You'll see 3 dots at the bottom and a word at the bottom of your screen. You can click on that to reveal participants, and that's where you'll be able to raise your hand. You can also put questions, comments, or share information on resources in the chat. We will keep this chat, so this is information that we would be able to capture and reshare with the community. We'll try to get to as many speakers as possible. So if you have had a turn, we may call on others before returning to those who have already had a chance to speak, to be able to have as many people offer their perspectives as possible. Mike McInerney will help identify those who are raising their hand to speak with muting and unmuting of microphones so that participants can speak. And again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Tahina. And now I will call on Melissa and Meg. For anyone who may have missed their earlier introductions, Melissa Yang Rock is Associate Professor of Geography and Affiliate Faculty in WGSS and Asian Studies, and Meg Devlin O'Sullivan, Associate Professor of History in WGSS. They have a brief presentation to remind us of major themes of the letter, No End in Sight, Caregivers in Crisis Under COVID. And they will do this, after which the floor is going to be open for discussion. Melissa and Meg.
Thank you. Thank you, Provost Lyman, and also President Christian, for organizing today's forum on work-life balance, especially as we face a caregiver crisis under our current COVID pandemic. Before getting started, I wanted to share a little bit about the multiple hats I wear that informs my analysis of the current caregiving crisis that unfortunately did not start with COVID, but rather as evidence of an already inequitable social and economic landscape that's been further and intensely exacerbated by the COVID pandemic. In addition to my role as Associate Professor of Geography, WGSS, Asian Studies, with dual degrees in Geography and Women's Studies, I'm a mother of 2 young children, a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old, both of whom are at home full-time as the New Paltz Central School District continues to stay fully remote for at least another month. My time at New Paltz is framed by significant life experiences and events related to my family. The first is my daughter's diagnosis with neuroblastoma, a malignant childhood cancer. When she was 16 months old, that diagnosis was the weekend before I was scheduled to come to SUNY New Paltz for my on-campus interview in early March of 2014. Luckily, we caught the cancer early and were able to surgically remove the tumor within 11 days of diagnosis. We just celebrated her 8th birthday this Saturday. And I share this with you because her health history has monumentally impacted my family's decision-making process around potential exposure and vulnerability during the pandemic. The second significant experience is the birth of my second child relatively early in my career at SUNY New Paltz. This was before the state mandated partial paid leave program to support family leave. The process of discussing and negotiating reassigned time and the use of my sick leave after childbirth was unnecessarily time-consuming, frustrating, and deflating. What I came to understand through my experience and conversations with numerous faculty and staff who have been through the same process is that the university's insistence on handling these issues on a case-by-case basis is onerous, opaque, and disproportionately and negatively impacts female employees through opportunity costs owing to time spent in the negotiation process, as well as the absence of long-term structural supports for caregivers in general. If we can understand the fundamental patterns of impacts on our employees, whether from childbirth or this pandemic, it seems insufficient to be handling matters solely on a case-by-case basis. Lastly, almost 12 years ago, my father passed away from early onset Alzheimer's disease at the age of 64. I was in graduate school at Penn State University at the time. I lived at home in State College with my dad and my stepmom so I could help with his high needs care during his many years of decline. I know many of the mental, physical, and emotional challenges of taking care of our elderly, ill, and disabled parents. The weight of this work is heavy. It's not something that can be easily done alone. We need each other. We need help, especially now. And I want to pass it over to Meg to give the introduction before we go into our finer points, to give her introduction.
Hi, I want to echo Melissa's thanks to President.
Meg, may I ask you to speak up? Your microphone may be a little far away from you. Sorry to interrupt you, but I wanted everyone to hear you.
Thank you. All right. Better?
Yes, much better.
Okay. So I'd like to thank President Christian and Provost Lyman and all of you who are here with us today. As you know, I am Meg Devlin O'Sullivan, Associate Professor of History and Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies. Like Melissa, I am also a mother. However, my children are slightly older at 10 and 13 and require significantly less care than the younger children of many of my colleagues. My care work does not presently include elder care or care for a partner or a friend with pre-existing health concerns. Yet I want to note that my relative freedom from care work is not the experience of many on campus. In addition to the personal perspective that I bring to this topic, I'm a feminist scholar and an historian of women in the United States. As such, I'm familiar with the long history of women's unpaid work, the ways in which it has structurally disadvantaged them, the gains that have been made over time, and the intersectional inequities and injustices that remain. I want to be clear, because I have the security of tenure, a partner to assist me, and children who are old enough to manage much of their days on their own, I'm advocating for change on our campus during this moment, not out of personal need, but out of personal conviction. I know what it's like to parent young children while on the tenure clock, and on occasion without the help of at least one other adult. Had COVID-19 struck 8 to 5 years earlier, my career and well-being would have been in jeopardy. However, there are some in our community who are in this precise position right now. I also want to make clear that while the present challenges and the things we'll discuss today may have some of the greatest impacts on women, they affect many, if not nearly all of us, in one way or another. These are things that affect all parents, all adult children with elders to care for, all caregivers to the myriad people in our lives who we love.
So I wanted to, I'd like to underscore and echo what Meg just shared. The reasons Meg and I stepped to the forefront of this cause on our campus is certainly because of our personal experience and professional expertise, but also because of our tenured status and relative support from our academic departments. There are many on our campus community who are not in a position where they feel comfortable speaking up, but who are struggling. There's plenty of evidence, both at the national level and at our campus level, that the pandemic has upended our regular lives. In the chat box, I'm pasting a link to a very short slide presentation. It's really 3, a cover slide and 2 others, for folks to look at and reference. That has some hyperlinks that I'll be discussing. But with respect to how the pandemic has upended our regular lives, an employee survey administered this summer from July 6th to August 18th by SUNY Central Administration, where more than 700 New Paltz employees responded to a SUNY survey on COVID's impact. That represented over or nearly half of the 1,500 respondents from all of the SUNY campuses. So there are many SUNY faculty who wanted to make sure that, and staff who wanted to make sure that they were heard. And so approximately half of those who reported or responded were teaching faculty. And there's a link within the slide share that I just posted in the chat that goes to the SUNY-wide survey results. But essentially it showed that about 78% of non-teaching employees felt that they were unable to complete their work responsibilities at the same level as when they worked remotely, compared to 59% of teaching faculty who said the same. 35% of respondents have a dependent residing in their home who required care. And of those with dependents at home, about 71% took off significant time to provide that care. About 72% said caring for a dependent at home affected their remote work significantly. The top 3 challenges to working remotely were increased family responsibility, lack of appropriate workspace, and problems with a computer. However, there's been very little done to address the burden of increased caregiving loads brought on by this pandemic, even as this fall, most K-12 schools reopened either fully remotely or in a hybrid fashion, meaning that their kids go to school in person a maximum of 2 days per week. If you look at the slide link that I dropped in the chat just moments ago, the second slide provides a number of links to our letter with proposed solutions, to a list of articles that I've begun compiling related to caregiving under COVID and the disproportionate impact it's bringing to caregivers, especially women and people of color. A link to the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, the FFCRA, which I didn't realize until recently in researching this, that we were eligible to apply for, as well as links to some examples of what other universities have done to support their employees through these challenging times. So I highlighted work that's been done at other universities, including at California State University, where they issued a temporary administrative paid leave policy, expanding the hours of paid leave people could take advantage of by twice as much as they had been before, including childcare needs due to COVID or remote schooling. UC Berkeley paid administrative leave, as well as information about the FFCRA and other comprehensive caregiving supports. Johns Hopkins University had the most extensive, which is understandable in some ways as a private university. And I provided lots of links within the PowerPoint slide to their PowerPoint presentations, their COVID caregiving relief fund, and then also a report that supports their junior faculty. University of Oregon also had a relief fund where they garnered $50,000 in donations through their giving and donation program to help people with caregiving responsibilities and the increased cost of that over the COVID pandemic time. University of Michigan also provided information about paid time off options. In particular, I want to point out Johns Hopkins University supports for their faculty and staff, not only because it's comprehensive, but because the report they put out that is hyperlinked in the slide contains not only well-articulated understanding of the cross-cutting issues and challenges identified by Johns Hopkins University Pandemic Academic Advisory Committee, Child Care Working Group, but also through their thorough and substantive recommendations for the university to continue its work going forward, including its commitments to equity with regard to career advancement for junior faculty. Of course, I understand that they are a private university and we are a public institution. The point of highlighting their example is to underscore what can be done, including taking this issue seriously and understanding it as an issue that impacts not just our work during the pandemic, but will continue to reverberate possibly for generations of academics after. Indeed, their child care working group recommends on page 22 that they track the pandemic's impact on faculty, recommending that the university and each division should systematically track the pandemic's impact on junior faculty with a focus on differential impacts by race, ethnicity, sex, gender, and orientation, age, and clinical versus non-clinical faculty. Results should be used to inform decision-making and, when appropriate, to develop targeted programming and opportunities. So this is our opportunity. I'll pass it over to Meg.
All right, so just a final thought before we go to our next panelist. So we often call this moment unprecedented. And we don't always as frequently call a crisis that is unprecedented a situation that demands unprecedented solutions. We might have to think in new ways and imagine creative changes. We might need to show up in unprecedented ways for each other. A quote that I love comes from George Eliot, and I would argue it applies in this moment, and yes, even in the workplace. And that quote is, "What do we live for, if not to make life less difficult to each other?" So while we need compassion and attention to individual needs and specific situations, we also need campus-wide change in policies because these issues are not private and individual, but structural and collective. I would like to close by asking the administration to consider these issues as such and begin to discuss with us today how we might deal with them via policy and not one-off accommodations when it is appropriate to do so. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Melissa and Meg. You are our two formal presenters or panelists per se in that formal sense. So thank you for distilling issues expressed in the faculty letter and for setting the stage then for our more productive dialogue here this afternoon. I would now open the floor for discussion, and I would ask others to share. As I indicated earlier, we are here to hear others' stories or situations, ideas, and possible solutions, as President Christian has said. And I'm not particularly well versed in it, but there is an approach to asking questions that some of you, I'm sure, know much more than I, that is called appreciative inquiry. And so those elements include, or the way it's explained sometimes, just four basic elements. So can we appreciate the best of what is? There are resources that are available that should be known. How far can we go to envisioning what might be? We begin today dialoguing and, to be continued about what should be. And then as our resources and abilities and capacities will allow, there is innovating and moving towards what will be. So we will wait to see if we have a hand up or who is willing to begin the conversation or to take it to a next phase.
Provost Lyman, if I may, because everybody seems a bit waiting to say something. Which happens in a large group like this. I'm Avram Siegel, and with my partner, Lee Degnan, we are the EAP representatives on campus. EAP stands for Employee Assistance Program. And let me say that I am a relative newbie to the campus. I've been teaching in sociology as an adjunct. I'm also a lawyer admitted in New Jersey. I tell you that now so that nobody calls me for legal advice. But I had been cutting back on my practice, and I also am an associate professor at Montclair State University, where I teach in the Department of Political Science and Law. And so looking for something to do, I approached President Christian and asked, or when I saw the ad for looking for coordinators. And so Lee and I both were fortunate enough to get the position. I'm a big believer in giving back to the community, and I really enjoy, I've enjoyed my time here. That being said, Lee and I discussed this before we rejoined the meeting today. Once again, EAP is a free service to all faculty and other workers and staff on the campus. I want to make that clear. Number two, we are a resource for everybody on the campus. When I say resource, as Meg and Melissa mentioned, we are in unusual times, to say the least. And that being the case, we have resources where we can refer people to various agencies, childcare, mental health, those kinds of things that are necessary for many of us and many of you on the campus. And so we would encourage you, we have a brochure, and you can go to the EAP website and see the services that are available. And I want to point out that everything that, for anyone who comes to see us, all right, everything is confidential. That is to say, we are not an appendage of the administration. We are independent of the administration. And so whatever disclosures are made in total confidence. Number two, that I should point out, is we are not advocates. That is to say, we don't get involved with policy in terms of what those who approach the administration about might like to do, to see, whatever. That is not our function. Our function is to refer people, to assist them, and in terms of childcare and mental health and even grieving, because we are in a period of many people being lost. Lee and I were at a recent training session. We go for training periodically, where a psychologist was present and talked about how to handle grieving. And so all of those things which encompass the life-work balance are things that we can offer to the members of the community. And I would like to say, you know, based on my experience, because I've been at Montclair State for 40 years, this is very much the way a university community should operate. And I'm pleased to be part of it. And I'll defer to Lee if she wants to jump in.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Abram. Lee, we'd love to hear from you.
Thanks. All right, so I'm not used to public speaking, so hopefully I don't trip myself up over here. But anyway, so as we're going through the discussion, I am taking notes and making sure that, you know, the issues that arise or, you know, is told through here, I am going to try to record as much as I can and certainly seek out the resources that I'm trying to go and do and hopefully provide that. I also wanted to point out that we do have our own page website, and I created a COVID-19 tab as well, because I saw that there was a whole bunch of resources that were cropping up once the COVID-19 hit, and I thought they were more relevant in that, you know, that scope. So I kind of brought those together. So that whatever was coming through on the EAP side, on the New York State Goer websites, and what was coming through, you know, through the university emails, I was trying to compile them both together, and you'll see on that page that I've compiled some of that, including like you know, Department of Labor stuff, you know, any kind of help through there, you know, for you know, funding or assistance or whatever. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure that you guys knew what I do. And then hopefully, as I come across the resources, I'll start throwing them up on the page. And also, you know, hopefully I can also dole out that information too as we go along. I don't want to really bombard people with the emails, but I'm trying to, kind of meter that too, but hopefully I can disseminate the information as they come. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Lee.
Hi, Barbara, could I speak?
Yes, please do, Beth.
Okay, so I want to thank everybody. I want to thank the administration for putting this conversation together, which was prompted, of course, by the No End in Sight letter that went out to the campus community. I want to thank Meg and Melissa for all their incredibly hard work on this. A couple of things I do want to point out at this point as the president of the union chapter is that, in fact, the generation, we had a small working group that created the letter, that generated the letter. It came out of a concern that we in the leadership of the union had with this being one of the major issues for the year that we identified in a retreat we had at the end of the summer. We, as the union, we are speaking with, or seek to speak with a collective voice for all of our bargaining unit members and beyond, because we realize it's not only UUP members who are undergoing these difficulties currently, all of everyone who works on campus who has a child. I mean, I've heard Tahina have, stories about some of her, challenges that she's had. So it's something that cuts across basically everybody on the campus, and not just our campus. It's, it's like the situation that we're all in. One other thing I do want to point out that the EAP program is itself funded as part of our statewide agreement. This is something that the union has negotiated. And so there's money that's provided as part of our statewide contract to fund all of the EAP programs that are run across the state. So, I mean, the union's interest is in this kind of collective approach to things, which is something that Melissa and Meg both beautifully touched on in their comments. While we at the union certainly deal with individual members when they come forward with issues, we're always looking to try and identify those broader kind of policy level kinds of changes that might be made, thinking about things structurally on behalf of all of the workers on the campus. So toward that end, I mean, I just wanted to kind of reiterate that from the union point of view and make sure that everybody recognizes that this is something the union has from the square one been engaged with and trying to advance these interests. I did see a question in the chat from Andrea Knoll about the sick time. That's another feature of our statewide collective bargaining agreement. I can tell you, having been on the negotiations team for the current contract that we're on, GOER and the state, who are on the other side of the table from us, were exceedingly inflexible about this question of sick time. We have tried to bring it up again and again. I think it's going to take a broader effort on the part of organizing our members and making this sort of thing a real issue in the next round of negotiations that we have. At this point, because of the constraints of the contract, this is kind of where we're at, unfortunately. But I think you raised a really excellent point, Andrea, about something that we need to be demanding in the next contract. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Beth, for presenting us with the stance or the perspective from which you are doing much of your listening today, and for going ahead and answering a question or responding to a question that was in chat.
Barbara, I want to also jump in and say that sort of a companion to the question raised by Andrea is sort of the use of time. The way that time donation is arranged is sort of, it's prescribed to state agencies. It is policies that are created through the Governor's Office on Employee Relations in conjunction with offices that pay attention to time and attendance for the state. So unfortunately, many of those pieces that would seem sort of like it would come from the generosity of a community to say, I have this extra, let me give to somebody else who has a need. Unfortunately, the rules around that are pretty prescribed, so that we're not able really to donate sick time in those kinds of cases for people who have more and wish to be able to share with others in the community. We do have donation for vacation time for a sick bank. But again, the rules around that are pretty prescribed in that it is for, to help supplement long-term illnesses. And no one was thinking, right, that this would encompass something larger than individuals coping with long-range illnesses, but thinking about a long-range crisis that includes not just one's own personal health and interest at heart, but the risk to other people in their home and in their care circle. So,
Thank you, Tahina. I'm wondering if we have any hands raised, of course, and if we have any questions in the chat or even comments perhaps that could be shared as a way of prompting or eliciting other participants' engagement.
Well, our colleague Amanda Merritt wrote that she's been working at home almost full time since the shutdown. She and her husband are raising a 5-year-old grandson, another and different dynamic, right? Today, Kingston started in-person school 2 days a week. They are sending him into in-person school after worrying a great deal about what that might mean to them in higher risk categories. But this is the first time since March that she had 6 uninterrupted hours in which to work at home.
Very good. Thank you. And I saw that Ed Felton has his hand raised. So
as does Melissa Rock.
All right. And I'm not sure of the order. So we'll have to ask for cooperation between the two.
I think
Ed, I believe you had your hand up first. You can
I think
go.
Melissa had her hand up first and then Ed.
I'll defer to Ed. I think I saw his, but thank you, President Christian.
All right, very good, Ed.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
So the start of in-person schooling at Kingston School District is very much alive and real here. And our plan fell through for the day, so I'm going to say because of that, since it seems relevant to the topic, I'm going to have to leave at 2 to go pick up my son from school. I'm going to try to remain in the meeting. I'm going to be switching over to my phone. Melissa's and Meg's analysis are just so incredibly thoughtful and informed, and really represent, particularly all of us in service of higher education. It really kind of informs a thorough, vigorous approach of our mission in terms of social progress in general. I mean, we have to be we have to have our sights in the right place when we attack these issues. It's a shame that in the United States in 2020, that resources around an issue like this are even an issue. And there will be a couple of things coming up very soon, within days actually, for everyone to participate in. The UUP Chapter Executive Committee recently decided to participate in a photo campaign, Fund SUNY Now. I just quickly made a very poor version of it. I do have one of these online, and so do many others. Fund SUNY Now, Tax the Rich. We're going to be asking people to take these kinds of selfies and post them. It's a campaign that's growing. There's also another much more targeted campaign that information will be going out for specifically to our own campus community about the stock transfer tax in New York, which I believe amounts to $14+ billion a year that's going to Wall Street instead of into the state budget to offset, to put money where it belongs in education and elsewhere. So we are in the throes of a crisis, though, and in terms of funding, of course, we'd love to accelerate those efforts and have those kinds of solutions come quickly. But in the meantime, I think we can act like the strong community that we are, and find some ways to provide mutual support. There are many people who I think are, and I feel mostly like I'm lucky to mostly be able to manage this in a sane way. But the thing that worries me the most are the people who are slipping through the cracks and who really are desperately in need of solutions. And it's a matter of coordination. And I'll be perfectly clear, I am not volunteering to play this role, but I think it would be really valuable for the administration, for them to find a way to carve out space in someone's work to coordinate a network which would allow people to step forward and say that they have needs, and for it to be approached in a collective way. I mean, just to provide a concrete example, if such a network existed, I would be ready, willing, and able to identify someone who's I live in Port Ewan, maybe it'd be someone close by, someone in the same school district who has a need and would be willing to discuss the possibility of bubbling, as we say these days, and so that we could assist each other, or so that I could assist in the management of childcare or care for anyone who needs it. I think we have a strong community, and if people's needs were known, that there could be, to a certain extent, and it's not a complete solution, but to a certain extent, we could behave like the strong community we are, and have some solutions naturally present themselves.
Thank you, Ed. And I believe that there are some individuals who have been trying to raise their hand, and I hope that they've all been able to get to that feature. And so I'd like to know who we might hear from next.
So up next is Melissa, who was going to follow Ed, and then
That's right.
I have Kirsten Green waiting on deck after that.
All right, Melissa, back to you.
Thank you. So I just put the for anybody who joined the conversation later, the slide that I shared earlier. I want to, I guess, pull us to the third page of that slide, the resources. And so I included, of course, EAP, the SUNY New Paltz Mutual Aid Network. That's really basically designed to kind of share in, if somebody does get sick and needs somebody to cover courses for a week or two, and whether it's in-person, hybrid, or virtual. UUP, of course, and then I also wanted to highlight, for those living in New Paltz, there's a K-12 working parents resources webpage that Katie Tobin kind of spearheaded this working group, that I'm also on that group, and we're working to try to make sure there's updated information there as well. Unfortunately, it's just for New Paltz, and I know our faculty and staff live much further, and so happy to provide more information and networks as we can. And then, of course, Family of Woodstock, that also does a childcare referral page. The other thing I wanted to note was that on there is the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. I didn't realize this. And also, I would say that I was also I was optimistic at what was going to be possible this fall, trying to be like, okay, I'm going to do my courses, going to plan for them, going to try to make this, do my other service research, question marks. And then also my children at home full time. One that's essentially in preschool and who doesn't have any virtual learning. So it's just all us all the time. And the other one who's older and has some remote stuff and a lot of asynchronous stuff. And then us trying to supplement to make sure they don't kind of fall through the cracks. But the Families First Coronavirus Response Act actually has a stipulation for paid leave. And in that, I didn't realize this, but if you have a child who's basically in remote, because they talked about whether or not your childcare or school is shut down or closed, and actually remote learning and even hybrid learning is considered closed, right? They physically can't go to that space. And so if you end up needing to be able to help your child, you do qualify for that. The stipulation, of course, is that it's 2/3 pay for the kind of extended pay leave part of that. And the other stipulation is that it right now is only the end date is December 31st, 2020, right? So we don't have something that goes on to next semester. It obviously involves some complicated working depending on whether or not you're an academic faculty teaching courses this semester or your professional faculty on a 12-month schedule that's not necessarily aligned with the academic schedule. But I think that this was something that I did not realize was something that was available to us, that I think that honestly, our human resources page should have on it, to know whether or not it's something that we can make use of and how we can make use of it. Because honestly, at a 2/3 pay, if you're thinking about it, my family is not comfortable we've had no babysitters, we've had nothing this whole time since March, since we all went remote. We've just been a pod of 4 people, right? My partner and I, who both work full time, and our 2 children and our dogs and chickens. But it's been a very kind of tight insular network to basically keep my daughter safe. And so, if you think about it, but for those families who might basically say, okay, we need to hire a babysitter to come in, we need to send our kid out, which we didn't have that cost before because they were going to public school, but we're going to send them somewhere that they can get babysitting during the day, and then so we can get work done, depending on how much that costs. And it's not cheap, right? A 2/3 pay cut, or sorry, 1/3 pay cut may actually make sense. Right. And so these are the kind of challenging things that if we have different structural supports that actually make it economically feasible, because none of us don't want to work. We do want to work. We do care about our jobs, and we care about our students, and we care about this university and the life of this university. Right. We understand what's coming down the pike, but we're trying to make things neat for our families. We're trying to figure out what to do for the university. But I think there was a really great article over the summer that said basically especially for caregivers, you can be a caregiver / a parent, you can work, or you can have your mental health. Pick 2 of the 3. You can't have all 3. And I think that's a big problem. And that's what we need to kind of figure out what to do. And if people are finding that their mental health, their ability to cope with all these pressures, this kind of pressure cooker, they're going to have to make different decisions. And I'll tell you that we're not the only ones, obviously, in this situation. The New Paltz School District and the superintendent there is also trying to balance with the same kinds of issues. They mentioned as much in the most recent town hall that they had, in that if they are not flexible with their faculty and who wants to do remote and not, some of them are going to take advantage of the Families First Coronavirus Response Act and then not be able to be teachers in the classroom. And then that's going to throw off the whole balance of what they're going to be able to offer. And so these are definitely issues that we need to grapple with and to understand. And if we can make it structurally much more feasible for faculty to make a decision that is both in their family and their own personal mental health's best interest, as well as the university, then we can all give to make sure that we stay a tight-knit community that can help and support each other through this. Because if we do it on a case-by-case basis, we're always just basically saying like we're all on our own, so do what's best for you. Then it's some of those supports are going to suffer, and possibly it's going to also negatively impact the university more than we want it to as well. And so I just kind of want to put all those kind of cards on the table to say that we all want to make this work for everybody. But right now, the people who I feel like are struggling most are trying to make it work as much as possible for themselves and the university. And we need help. We just need help. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Melissa. And I think Tina said that Kirsten was next. Kirsten?
Hi, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
We can.
So I just wanted to share a couple of things. I am so grateful for this conversation today. Thank you for everyone that was involved in making it happen. It's been a very difficult time, as many people have already said. Similar but different to Amanda, when my husband was furloughed in the spring, I actually had some additional time to get work done during the day. My son was spending time all day with his daddy, which was great for us. And then in the summertime, when he returned to full-time work, and I was teaching, which we typically do in the School of Ed, or many of us, that gave me a taste of what this fall would look like. And I guess part of what I wanted to contribute to the conversation may not be welcome, but I'm going to say it anyway. I feel like the elephant in the room that nobody's sort of naming is being able to get the work done. I'm struggling to get my work done. And I'm saying that knowing that I'm taking a risk in this public forum saying that. But I also feel like I have a sabbatical coming up in spring, and I'm literally like crawling. I feel like just like holding my breath, waiting till that happens. And I know I have a built-in break that many people don't. I'm also really worried about what I'm not going to produce during that sabbatical. I was expecting to already have a book proposal accepted and know where I'm going to be writing the book that I was hoping to do on my sabbatical. That is not a reality at this point. And so, not to go on and on, but really in my 3 areas of work, teaching is the only thing that I'm doing. It's the only thing that I'm capable of getting to at the moment. People want to know how I'm able to teach during the day while my son, who just finished his final afternoon meeting and will go run off and do something, hopefully not create a disaster in the living room. I teach mostly in the evenings. I teach 3 nights a week. I'm also teaching in overage because we're down people in the program. We don't have enough people to teach the classes that we need to be taught. In terms of serving, I'm quietly trying to step off of committees that I'm not able to be on right now. And in terms of scholarship, I'm simply not doing it. So just wanted to name, be very honest. I'm shaking saying this because I feel like I'm admitting that I'm not able to do the things that I'm expected to do. I'm in front of 100+ people, but I know I'm not the only one. And it's something that people have absorbed for years and years and years. And now we have a crisis that's affecting everybody. And it's time we talked about it and figured out how to help each other. So thank you so much for making space today for this conversation. It's so important.
Thank you, Kirsten.
Can I claim the floor for just a second?
There he is.
Yes, Don.
Kirsten, I really appreciate you raising that point. It's one that in administrative circles we talk about a lot, that everybody across the institution seems to set the same high standard for themselves in these times as we have otherwise. And that's just not, it's not humanly possible. And the points that you raise are part of the reason that I wanted to be sure that we had faculty governance representatives as part of this conversation today, because I think service loads, expectations for scholarship on an ongoing basis have to be part of this conversation. And those are items that fall into the realm of faculty governance. So no need for embarrassment about raising the issue that you raise. I think all of us are struggling to try to keep up with all the things that we think we should be doing, but recognize we can't.
Thank you, Don, and Kirsten too. I can't see everything that pops up in the chat before it goes away, but I'm sure many people are grateful for your willingness to name those things that you decided that you would. I'm wondering if we have hands. I think there's some activity in the chat. And I would just invite others to please, again, share stories, ideas. Obviously, there are signs that this has presented an opportunity for people to learn more about some resources that are already available.
I will be putting in the chat. There are actually, the resources are available on the HR site. There's actually a COVID resources link, so I'll put that in there. And then I'll specifically put the link on about the different types of leaves that are available. And obviously, if there's any questions, you can always contact somebody in HRDI. We know that there's been just a lot of information all the time coming at the campus. And I think we try really hard to put out as much information as we can as we get it, because we know that people are worried about these things and they want to have information as quickly as possible to make decisions. But we also know there's a lot coming at everybody all the time. But some of these resources that you'll see in the link were featured in Daily Digest as we receive news of them throughout the summer and the early fall. And we'll continue to do that. And again, we know that it's hard to check your email and figure out what you have and what did you hear about and which piece did you last catch up on. But we'll continue to try our best to communicate those things as we know them.
Thank you.
I guess I had my hand up.
Okay,
Again,
go ahead.
I thought I would jump in here. Tell you a couple more things based on what has been said thus far. One of the things that EAP also does during the year, and unfortunately this year it's not as easy to do, is we sponsor programs that we think will be of interest to the members of the community. Last semester, we had, or last spring, we had somebody come in and talk about tax preparation for, for members of the community. We've also had a chiropractor come in. We've had a health and wellness person come in, and these are done. These programs are usually done during the lunch hour, so everybody can attend. And so, if people have programs that are of interest, they should let us know. The other thing is that all this does not happen without participation. And I see Kevin and I see Ginger and some of the other people who are on our committee. And the committee is formed in order to promote EAP and promote the programs that will be beneficial to the rest of the community. So this is the pitch part of the of my pitch, which is if you'd like to join us, we're meeting November 2nd. Let us know if you're interested in joining the committee. If you want to see what it is we do in terms of the planning and the people who give their time for that purpose, please feel free to join us. We'll be happy to send you a link. And certainly we're interested in your feedback. And so if you have members of your departments and whatever, let us know. That way we can see if we can formulate a program. But certainly the other thing is, going back for a moment, we maintain a phone number. It's on our website, and you can call us. We have if we're not there, and right now, obviously, Student Union Building is, I think, on the 3rd floor under construction, or was. So our office is not, we're not manning or womaning our office. And so, everything, as I said, is confidential. In fact, nobody in the building or on the maintenance staff has a key to our office. We're probably the only people besides the president who has their own key. And so we wanted to, affirm that we are, confidential. So, and if you can't reach us other than our answering phone, it'll give you an emergency 24/7 hour number. So we're there for everybody, and we hope that you'll spread the word. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
In the chat, I'm seeing some links. Just want to draw your attention to folks. Melissa's sharing some links going back to Ed Felton's thoughts on coordinating pods and coordinating cooperative care. I just want to make sure that folks are seeing that to show up there in the chat. I'm not seeing new comments or raised hands though.
Gwyneth Lloyd is trying to raise a hand.
I didn't see Gwen, so if you see her, we can let her talk. And then I have Nancy Campos on next.
Gwyneth is raising a physical hand.
Okay.
Can someone
she could
unmute
be
her?
unmuted. Mm-hmm.
She's still
I
muted.
just sent her the request to unmute.
Okay. Am I good?
Oh, yes.
Good.
We see you.
Okay. Okay. First and foremost, thanking everyone for sharing such personal and very touching stories and personal narratives. I think in light of what Dr. Lineman said, I kind of want to respond a little bit. And we tend sometimes, and we need to find a lot of solutions, long-term and short-term. But there are some real immediacy things that we can do too, as we're all struggling for that connection. And certainly one of the things this COVID-19 have done is kind of isolate us. And we all feel so very deeply isolated, even whether or not we're staggering into the office or whether or not we're working totally at home. Even in my office, I feel like I miss my staff. I miss that connection. I miss coming in the morning and laughing and talking or sharing food and exchanging stories. And what that means, people are going through all those things very much alone. So as a staff, none of us are working in this total pod. We are working in our pods because those are survival strategies and techniques. But I would also really encourage each and every one of us to just connect, with people in the office. You don't get to see your colleagues. So instead of email, call. I think it is so much easier for us to send emails, and that is still so, it's good to know somebody's thinking about you, but also, even though we may feel the pressure, and there's a lot of pressure because we don't have time to talk to anyone, texting is nice, but nothing is as beautiful as just having a conversation and being able to laugh and get it right away, So I would encourage each and every one of you to just reach out to a colleague in your department that you have not seen, that you're not able to see, or colleague across campus that you're not able to see because we don't have meetings and we're not running around, trying to get from one place to the other. So sometimes we just have to start with where we're at, and where we're at is in isolation. But what is the most free and costless activity that we can do is to pick up that phone and to call and connect. Just say, hey, I'm just checking in. Even your custodial staff, they have a very important role, and a great thing having conversations with them, and just being able to say, if you had a chance to have a conversation or to have your number, just being able to have a conversation. So I think that's where the humanness comes in, and that's what we're all missing and we're craving so very much. So I would encourage each and every one of you, just picking up the phone and calling and having that personal connection, just checking in and just sharing a funny story and just laughing, or just listening to their personal narrative, because sometimes you just had to do it in writing as much as you can do it on the phone. A human connection, a laugh, a cry, a tremendous dosage of empathy. And the last thing I would like to say to that is, as you shared your stories, I was very touched, and certainly there's a lot of strong feelings. And I also want you to know that same degree of struggle that you're having, and being able for us to be empathic with each other, it is the same kind of empathy that we will need to have as we try to evaluate our students. And to find that balance between the integrity of the core of what you do and the needs of that student. So I can't help but to just say, they have just as much touching, very difficult, challenging personal experiences just as you're having. So I just like you to keep that in mind as you're struggling with your own pieces, that they too are struggling with theirs, and how important it is for us to keep that in perspective, even when we want to give them that F, even when we want to feel like we want to, I can do it, you can do it. And that is true. But we also still want to try to remember we are all in this together, and we're all struggling to find answers. So I just kind of wanted to say the humanness, the connection. And it is hard because we all wear masks, so we can't even see when somebody's smiling at us. But we can tell over the phone when somebody is smiling at us, when we're having a conversation. And it's good for the heart. Mental health-wise, it speaks to the heart. Love to laugh. So I would encourage you to just come out. And last week, I know Sarah Weinman and I, we had the faculty staff walk, and just still in time to do this, and just saying, I have to do just because I need to do it. So those are little things that we can do. They don't have to be big things, just little things. So thank you. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. Thank you for those reminders of the little things that can mean a lot.
Up next, we had Nancy Campos, who had put a question in the chat there.
Nancy?
Yes, hi. So I'm already 11 minutes late to my next meeting, so I just wanted to share this. So one of the things that I think we haven't talked about a lot, and it's a situation that I'm currently in. So both me and my husband our families are part of communities that have been very hard hit. And so for us, so we have a 2-year-old daughter, so we are not sending her to daycare, even though we technically could, because we just feel like that would put her at risk. She'd be exposed, and then we'd be exposed, and then that would severely limit our ability to then even visit our own family, which, you know, for us is the only people that we've been able to really see regularly since March. And that is a really big deal to us, and, you know, trying to keep them safe. And so, you know, that's something that I think we also need to think about, because obviously we know, especially communities of color have been very hard hit. And for us, that is something that is a complete reality. I mean, you know, while, yes, I know, you know, we could be sending her to daycare, we could be doing those things. If she was in school, I think the conversation would be a little bit different. But for us, it's a choice to keep her at home because we know everything else that we know about how the virus is affecting the communities that we are part of. And so I just wanted to bring that to the attention of everybody, because I think that is a very different kind of conversation. And then, you know, to add to that, yeah, you know, I work specifically working with students who also are part of these communities. And so the amount of stress that I have been dealing with in the last couple of months, not only at home trying to make sure, you know, I keep our family safe, making sure we're all doing okay, but then on top of it, working from home with a toddler. And if anybody has gone through toddler years, understands what that looks like. And then on top of it, you know, with my students, and then with a program that, you know, we're struggling right now through budget cuts and all of that. And what does that mean for the program and how we're able to support students? And so there is a lot going on, especially for those of us who are Black, Indigenous people of color, who work with these communities, who are part of these communities. So, you know, I just wanted to bring that to the attention. And now I'm 14 minutes late to my next meeting, but I did want to share that. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Nancy, for staying long enough to share that. Yes.
So I'd like to call next on Melissa Rock, and then I will address some of the things that are popping up on chat there.
All right, Melissa.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to echo, you know, the importance of what Nancy just said. And I think that, you know, when I was kind of doing the research and looking at some of the different points, getting ready for this presentation, and then also looking at what's been done at different universities, one thing is also clear is that it's not just the short term kind of how do we put little bandages on this moment, but, and I think I mentioned this in my intro, is that this is not a completely new issue, right? Caregivers have always had this like really weird balancing act that's usually not designed to kind of help them. And so, you know, it's part of kind of looking at this, seeing how it's been exacerbated, acknowledging that that's an issue, and then saying that we need to tackle that, and we need to tackle that systemically. And we also need to understand how it's been unevenly distributed across our community, our employees, our faculty, our staff, et cetera. And so, and then all the kind of cross-secting analysis of this, how it's being integrated or impacted both with the health impacts, but also the stress. I mean, this is also coming at a time whenever we're seeing a priority and an important priority placed on, you know, asking faculty to work with their curriculum to incorporate, you know, and have a nuanced kind of anti-racist focus in different ways, looking at, you know, the bias and reevaluating our curriculum in different ways. And that's hard work and important work. And so we need to do that. We also need to understand, and the people who have been doing that have also been really integrated in saying, okay, this is a moment where we're all feeling a lot of stress, and we are dealing with that. We're dealing with the pandemic. We also feel a lot of obligation for our communities, our students that also look to you for that. And so how do we handle all these kind of intersecting pressures, right? And so I think that we need to look at that and within also in conjunction with the caregiving focus. I want to go back to a couple points that were in the chat, though, that really look at the not having a unified policy and a communication around caregiving really allows this moment to be about your personal connections and your personal relationships with your chair, your dean, the people who you are connected to. And if you don't have a good relationship, or if you're even if you had a good relationship, but your chair or dean, and not thinking of anybody in particular, I'm just basically saying that there are examples on this campus where faculty and staff have not felt supported in being able to say, I have these issues and I need some kind of help. They feel that then bringing this up will put their head on a chopping block, and especially when we're talking about looking at austerity. Nobody wants to stick their head out right now because we're being told, of course, not explicitly, but we should all be thankful for having a job, period. So therefore, don't do anything to jeopardize that. But that comes at a price. And those who are struggling to kind of balance it all are then, therefore, if they raise their voice and saying, I'm carrying a disproportionate load, then therefore they're subjecting themselves to scrutiny, right? And so when we mention this, it is, again, the reason why Meg and I kind of jumped to the forefront of this is because I'm a newly tenured faculty member. If I did not have tenure, I would have asked some other faculty member to please put their name forward, because I'm not in a position to be able to stick my neck out. So we have to understand that there's really important power dynamics at play, that some people are not going to feel comfortable, no matter how stressful it gets, unless we have a policy that really looks at that and communicates effectively with our chairs, with our deans, to say we really need to support people. We need to give ourselves the benefit of the doubt right now, rather than saying you're just trying to make sure that you can get paid for being at home with your kids. Nobody's trying to do that. We need to make sure that they're okay. And that includes both the very young kids as well as the older kids, because what I've heard being in the K through 12 working group is that parents of kids who have older age kids are really struggling with their mental health, meaning that the kids and the parents, but the kids in the upper, like, high school ages are really suffering. And there's an increase of self-harm. There's an increase of depression in these kids, and parents need to be able to support them through it. These are going to be our students in the next generation, next couple of years, right? We want to support them, right? So we need to support our faculty, our community, to be able to support them further. And so what I'm trying to draw us back to is, I know that there are individual ways that we can help people one-on-one to some degree, but there's also ways that we can look at how systemic supports clear communication and trying to make sure that we don't have an uneven landscape with this uneven power dynamic that really then allows people who have tenure, who have security, who have good relationships because they've quote unquote played by the rules and never stuck their head out, to be able to quote unquote get more out of this situation, right? So we need to be able to have some very clear policy ideally come out of this discussion, so that people who feel vulnerable and who don't have that voice feel like they're also being heard. So thank you.
Thank you. Tahina?
I wanted to address a few things. There's a couple of folks there who may have come into the conversation a little bit late and didn't realize this, so I wanted to share with everybody now. This is being recorded. It's also being live streamed on YouTube. So there are, some of the questions in the chat is, what happens if folks who aren't here are really interested in this topic? How do they hear about this? So I wanted to make sure that it was clear that it's being live streamed and recorded. We're also preserving the content of the chat so that we can sort of collect resources that have been shared here and ideas, so that it can be communicated back out into the community or rest on websites so that it can be accessed as people might need it. And then I wanted to draw attention, I wanted to I guess, hop on to what Melissa was raising and what was appearing in the chat about the difficulties of trying to navigate this in silos of individual instances. And I think that, you know, I would love to see a situation where there could be some structural change. But before we get to that, or until we get to that, I just want to reassure the community that, you know, if there is an issue, if there is a worry about power dynamics, if there's an issue of fear, concern, lack of clarity for how to get resources, folks in HRDI are always willing to have a conversation. It doesn't mean that you have to take an action or make a decision in that day, but it may be the first step in trying to gather the information that you need to make the best possible decisions for you and your family. And we would be able to talk you through the myriad of different types of things that are available, and the paperwork and things like that that have to go with administering that, so that that part of it doesn't feel as much of a burden to carry on your own. I'm looking back at some of the chat. Jessica Pabone said she had to run, but she wanted the following. She wanted to ask, if you're not caretaking, if you are not BIPOC, if you are not struggling mentally, physically, how will you step up for the rest of us? This is how we move from individual problems and privileges to collective responsibility. Another one of our colleagues wanted to mention that in addition to all the other issues that we've been talking about here today, that we should not forget the fact that there is an increase in substance misuse and domestic violence and suicide, again, tied to some of the points that Melissa and others have been raising about the additional struggles, not just about scheduling and who has, you know, whose child does and doesn't go to school, but the other things that families are struggling with as well. And I think that's what I saw. I'm really sorry if I'm missing. It's just popping up so fast. I'm trying to keep up. But if there's something else that I miss, please feel free to draw my attention to it by writing to me in the chat or raising a question in the chat.
Barbara, can I chime in quickly?
Absolutely.
I'd like to follow up just very briefly on a couple of the points that Melissa made and that Tahina just reinforced. I have not been involved in great detail in navigating parental leave requests, but I have to say that I've been really impressed with some of the creativity that Tahina and Jody and others in HR, working with a faculty member and a chair and a dean, have come up with to accommodate different needs, different timings, say, of the birth of a child relative to teaching responsibilities. And I would hate to see us have a policy where we lose that individual attention to address particular needs. But I'm hearing the need for evening that landscape, I think was the terminology that Melissa used. And so that's a piece that we need to be attentive to.
Thank you, Don.
And I see Meg has a hand up.
Okay. Meg, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you. You know, one thing that I am thinking in response, President Christian, to your last remark, as well as the ones that preceded it, is that I generally believe that we are a campus of goodwill with good people. And I think that what might often be happening, absent policy, right, is that people have a perception of, I can't ask for, or this won't be accommodated. So that, in my mind, is a key reason for, again, policy and clear communication around these things, right? That it's not that we won't show up for each other, be taken care of, think creatively. It's not known. And, you know, I want to be careful and protect anonymity, but, you know, because my name was one of the names on the caregiver letter, I got responses from people who had concerns and they didn't feel like they could voice them or be public about them. Or go forward about them. So it's real, right? And I think one of the ways we mitigate this is by being proactive. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Barbara, does Stephanie Blaisdell have a hand up?
Yeah, and I hope I hope I can articulate that, you know, there's a lot to think about here, a lot to process. You know, mostly we've heard from teaching faculty. I know we have a lot of professional staff struggling with these issues as well. And, you know, I thought it might be important as a cabinet member to share that, I mean, I feel particularly fortunate. You know, I've worked at 4 different institutions. I have 3 children. I've weathered the deaths of 3 parents after illnesses. So there's a lot of caretaking in my history, and at the institutions that I've been at, I've been in an institution that I felt very unsupported at, and thankfully institutions I've felt very supported in. At one point, you know, I did a voluntary reduction of hours. And I was grateful that didn't reflect on me as a professional. I was never sort of punished for that, or, you know, and I just want to, I guess, communicate to my staff, not only do I think it's really important to ask for what you need, but also to maybe address the other elephant in the room, which is, you know, as Jessica alluded to, we need other people to step up, but that can feel like a real burden, you know, and feel inequitable. But I just want to draw us back to, you know, as an institution, we've adopted the UN Global Goals as our strategic planning foundation. And one of those goals is, you know, excellent education, quality education. And so we want the children of our staff and faculty to be getting good education right now, right? They need that foundation so that when they get to college age, maybe they are able to come to us or some other college. And so I think the investment in each other is really the investment in our future collectively. You know, this is just an incredibly difficult time. I'm so glad that my youngest child is 16 and fairly independent. She's almost able to drive, which, you know, is a good and bad thing. But I mean, when I look at my staff who are struggling, you know, on meetings with young children around, you know, my heart goes out to them. And so I just wanted to share that I think we can, you know, be an institution where we pitch in and support each other. And that in the long run, I think that careers can be successful, even if you have to cut back now.
Thank you, Stephanie.
I want to point to Melissa raised a question, and at least in part it was responded to. Melissa asked if there was somebody here from faculty governance to speak to potential ways of thinking through changes like DSI and RPT. And Rennie Scott Childress has joined us. He's presiding officer. And so Rennie, if you are in the magic squares out there somewhere, I'd let you address that.
Welcome, Rennie. Glad to know you've been able to join us.
Oh, thank you very much. My unmute finger is painfully slow today for some reason. Mm-hmm. As Anne pointed out, we're happy to talk about how faculty governance can respond to any of these issues and work through them. There are, of course, limitations. That would be something to be very clear about. Some of these are issues that have to be taken up through the union process. But we're ready to work with anybody who's got concerns. And so I put my email address in the chat there. It's Scott, SCOTTCHR, ScottCHR at newpaltz.edu. So, you know, we can set up a time to talk, many times to talk, and see what kind of response faculty governance can have. You can also, of course, have these discussions through your faculty senators, and they can bring those issues to us. So each department has a senator, and there are also senators at large for various units. And through that process, you could also allow issues to get up to us. So either way, we're happy to sit down. We're happy to try to figure out whatever we can to ameliorate and work through these grave dilemmas that you all are talking about today.
Thank you.
Melissa, I see your hand up again.
I'm sorry. I feel like nobody's talking, so I just feel like I'm like, okay, I'll do it. But and I'm sure other people have ideas, but so you know, feel free to privately chat me, and I'll speak up more for people who want to say something but are worried about it. But I guess like there's a lot of kind of individual emails kind of going around, and like, come talk to me. But I guess, you know, the question is, you know, should we, and I actually raised this earlier with our union, and I think I'm also on the executive committee as is Meg, of our union. And so, you know, we understand, you know, what our union's also been trying to work with the university and the different working groups. One of the things that I had brought up over the summer, and I believe was brought to the administration, but I guess I would like to propose it again, is can we have a working group that specifically looks at these work-life balance issues? It seems like when we're thinking about pandemic, right? The pandemic, we were really cautious about, okay, what's the impact of like making sure we have testing? Do we have the right PPE? Do we have this? Do we have that? But there's been a huge fallout with thinking about caregiving responsibilities and work-life balance, whether it's elder care, whether it's, you know, dependent care, whether it's, you know, all these different kinds of aspects, is that when we have a crisis of this proportion that has affected our school systems, which many of us not only rely on, obviously, for our child's education, but essentially for daycare, right? For our taxpayer dollars go in to get our child an education, but also to make sure that they're somewhere safe during the school day so that we can go to work, right? And that's been stripped away from us. And so this is a systemic problem. I don't see it shifting before the end of this academic year. And so, you know, I wonder if, can we have something similar to what Johns Hopkins put together? And granted, I mean, part of me is like, well, let's just go read their report and see if we have something similar, because they had such good ideas, and they convened a group, a body, to really look at these impacts on a systemic level. And, you know, that's pulling from research that's out there at many different institutions, but also looking at the kind of local impact here. Because I'll tell you, one of the ways that we are uniquely different is that also we're rural, right? When you look at the impact on childcare availability in a rural setting, it was already really slim pickings before the pandemic. And if you look at any of the news reports, many of the childcare centers, a lot of them have closed since July, I mean, nationally. And we would have to then do a report on, you know, what does it look like right now? What is the landscape? If EAP were to call to find out, you know, what child care centers are open and what is their limitations, it would look vastly different than last year, right? And so I feel like, you know, it's very possible that one of the things we do is create a working group that includes EAP, that includes, you know, UUP, that includes our administration, faculty, professional staff, like our professional faculty, everybody to come together to really think. It's CSEA, another part of our community, you know, the other unions represented, to really think through how can we look at how childcare is affecting all aspects of our employees within elder care, all caregiving responsibilities that has really shifted under this pandemic. How can we actually have a systematic approach, and what recommendations we maybe, and what are the targeted, like what can faculty governance do, what can the administration do, what can human resources do, right? And so basically we start understanding the spheres where, when somebody's saying I'm dealing with this thing, where is the right place to go, and how do those places overlap when I'm trying to seek help, right? And what, because one of the great things about that Johns Hopkins report is also looking at, especially like junior faculty, but also vulnerable faculty and staff, and their feelings of lack of agency. And I feel like that's a really important thing that we need to understand, is how does agency play into who's more vocal, less vocal, and how we can address those things. Silence doesn't always mean that we're all doing okay. It just may not mean that I feel comfortable telling you that I'm not doing okay, and stuff. And so I feel like we have some smart people here, and we have caring people. And so how can we bring these together in a way that supports the structure of actually taking this issue seriously and doing the work to then, and that's, I mean, granted, it's not necessarily a no cost. That's actually is basically saying, let's add some more work to some people. But like, I'll tell you, I've been doing a lot of work on this. I'm not getting paid extra for it, but it's because I care. And because then, honestly, one of the biggest things that I've learned through trying to do this on a case-by-case basis is that every single person who's doing it on a case-by-case basis is their own individual researcher. And usually it falls on the shoulders of the person who needs that to then spend hours upon hours. When I was negotiating for my MOU for reassigned time when I gave birth, I don't think of it as actually, there may have been creative products coming out of the MOU, but it was time consuming, and I could have probably gotten an article out if I didn't have to negotiate that. If there was actually a policy, right, that was actually based on, okay, we know the XYZ things happen whenever you give childbirth, so you will need certain time off for that. If we have that, that's what we're talking about with a unified across the board, that there are certain things that we know happen in childbirth, right? Whether it's vaginal or C-section, right? We know these things happen. Right. And so therefore, these things are the base minimum. And then if we want to negotiate on top of that for other cases, great. Same thing with the pandemic. We know base minimum that very few, unless your kid is going to a private school that has really great testing mechanisms, that your kid is not going to school full time 5 days a week. That's just not a thing that's happening in Ulster County, the Hudson Valley, down to New York City. If you're up in way upstate New York, there might be some counties that are doing that. But for the most of us, it's not happening. So there are some base minimums that we can all understand, and we can look at those patterns, and most likely that's not going to change in the near future. So I guess I'm proposing, can we basically push for having as an outcome of this forum somebody that's actually going to say, okay, we're going to strategically look at this, and maybe there are some immediate things that we can do, to get information out, and then there's some long-term impacts that we can also research. For example, junior faculty who are going up for tenure, can we also get in a DSI annual review or RTP an impact statement, COVID impact statement that talks about how COVID impacted their life and their productivity. Those are no cost solutions, but we just have to think through the ways that we make sure that this doesn't get bias against our faculty in this. And then can we, set up a system for we're a research, type of institution. We have some smart research people here. Can we research the impacts, the long-term impacts? Can we start tracking? This is through HR, and other places, but who gets RTPs, like who gets tenured or promoted, who gets DSIs, how is this going, so that we can also understand how our structures are either reinforcing this, who is requesting time off, and is that going to impact that? So we just at least need to start thinking about what we need to track to basically be able to look back in the rearview mirror and say, okay, how did this impact us? Because I am concerned about the long-term impact to female faculty, female professionals on our campus, and faculty and staff of color, people who are unduly burdened during this time. And so I think the way that we start doing it is doing what we do best, is starting to make sure that at least we have the ducks in a row to get some really good research done on this. And so I just wanted to kind of put that out there. And I see that we've caused some more talking points in the chat. So let's go.
Thank you, Melissa, for that comprehensive suggestion.
There's a question in the chat. One of the questions is the modifications to dependent care accounts, and whether or not that was impacted, obviously, by the loss of childcare facilities, after-school programs, before care programs, and summer camps. And there was some communication about being able to modify dependent care accounts and to be able to stop deductions. And then Beth kindly went ahead and offered some more information about how exactly that's done. Employees can make changes to their dependent care deductions at any point. And I myself had to do that. I had to stop contributing because everything ground to a halt and there was no aftercare, and eventually summer camps fell through and all that other stuff. And you can make changes to your contributions so that that money is not sort of sitting there expecting to be spent when the resources that you're spending it on are no longer available.
Tahina, have you heard anything about, because we're coming up on a new enrollment period for that, if they're going to be having the same kind of flexibility next year?
We have not yet heard, but in fact, we haven't really heard all the full details of open enrollment yet. That's usually done really close to the starting point, unfortunately, because benefits are not administered locally here on the campus. We get that, we sort of get our marching orders from the state, and when that becomes available, we haven't heard anything. I have raised it though in HR, in a system HR meeting, because I've already gotten questions about that. So as we know information, we'll make sure to get that out.
And while we are waiting for the next question or a person who would like to comment, I don't want to miss this opportunity to say one thing and follow up to a specific suggestion that Melissa included as she was talking about her proposal for a group to be formed to take to do comprehensive maybe guiding of how we move forward, how we approach, what we want to do next. And so in mentioning, and she can tell me whether I perceive this correctly, but Melissa mentioned the possibility of a COVID impact statement. And I wanted to be sure that everyone understood. I believe most people do, but this is also one of those things to be doing some tracking. And, although it means a little bit more work, it probably becomes important for a faculty member or a staff person in thinking ahead to reviews, to remember that it should always be possible. I know particularly in the reappointment, tenure, and promotion process, it is always possible to include an impact statement because of the required component, in fact, of a dossier of providing a narrative. Now, we know that these narratives typically maybe take on a certain aspect in that they are meant to, they're meant to give a comprehensive overview of a person's record and generally to talk about the accomplishments within that record. But there is a place in the narrative of a dossier presented for reappointment, tenure, promotion. There is a place for a COVID impact statement, and the precedent for that, everyone may not have been able to pay attention to that in that vast flow of information, and you have to make choices about what you pay attention to and not. But out of the SUNY UUP MOU related to the tenure clock extension, I think it often gets overlooked that there was a section of that MOU that dealt with materials review for any reappointment, tenure, or promotion process. Obviously, the tenure clock extension applies only to pre-tenure faculty. So there is guidance that was provided around the idea of making a COVID impact statement and weaving that into the narrative portion of a dossier, relating it all back to spring 2020. I guess when that MOU was devised, hope would have been still alive, that COVID would be something that we would be beyond at this point. And so we certainly know otherwise now. So I just want to remind everyone that the narrative very much presents an opportunity to provide a COVID impact statement. And I would encourage faculty to be tracking those things that do contribute to that impact.
Thank you, Barbara. I wanted to let folks know the flex spending does open next Monday, the enrollment for that. However, we have not yet been given the state forms, so we'll continue to update the campus as we hear about that. I also wanted to make sure that everybody saw that Kirsten Green offered a link to an article related to comments that Nancy Campos offered earlier. So, and again, we're keeping track of these, so we're going to hopefully be able to share more broadly to the campus. And I have Carolyn Corrado, who was waiting to speak. Carolyn?
Hi, Carolyn.
Hey, everybody. So I just wanted to reiterate the importance of thinking about policies for all. I think that, I don't know if there is anyone who's spoken today yet who is a contingent employee like myself. And so if there was, hey, good to see you. But I think for contingent employees, I think we always need to be keeping in mind who has their interests in mind. So for adjuncts and for lecturers, we talk a lot about pausing tenure clocks and how to put things in context. But for folks who are contingent, there isn't always as much of a concern about the longevity of those employees, for better or worse, and obviously for worse, honestly. And so it is a concern. I think that some people will speak to, trying to convince contingents that are on 3-year appointments that, there is stability there, and that if you're doing a good job, that you should not worry as much, but yet as a contingent employee, that's always going to be a concern. So in this time of uncertainty and of increased caregiving for those of us with children, myself included, there is sort of this increased pressure that is really hard to just say, that there will be an understanding on the part of, the folks who make decisions about your livelihood, that they'll understand, right? That there's these increased demands on time and so on. So I just wanted to reiterate on the part of, especially on the part of contingent employees, the importance of having these kinds of policies for all on our campus that are local to our campus. We understand, I think all of us are smart enough to understand that there are things that we can control and that we can't, and that there are things administrators can do and can't do. But what, I am kind of curious about, what administrators have been brainstorming together outside of this meeting. I know that this is a listening session of sorts, but I'm also curious to hear, what initiatives have been taken on the other side of things to say that, this is an issue that's known, and that, what have folks been talking about from the top down, as much as this is sort of a bottom up kind of a conversation today. And the last thing I just wanted to say is that, there's a lot of talk about quote unquote no cost solutions. And again, I don't think that there are any no cost solutions. Somebody has to pay. And unfortunately, it's often employees, that the cost is absorbed by employees. So salary reduction is not an option for most of us. And I would say, especially for adjuncts and especially for contingent employees who get paid significantly less than their tenure track and tenured folks, their tenured peers. And so I think that the thought of, taking that time off, and I can, speak at least to caregiving. When I came to New Paltz, within a year, I'd had my second child. That was a little bit of, an earlier timeline than I had planned. And I did not feel, at having only been here for a year, in my first year on the job, being pregnant for most of it, since I had my son in June, that I had any kind of a real ability to be able to take that leave when my son was only 8 months old when I came back. I'm sorry, 8 weeks old when I came back to work. And so I was not ready to be here. And I did not have a support system that I felt like I can take that unpaid leave and still have to pay for daycare. That was not a possibility for me. And so to piece things together might seem like an appropriate solution when they are really specific circumstances, but we're all in COVID right now. And while we might have specific kinds of caregiving responsibilities, again, I would just reiterate the importance of policies for all, and for also there being leadership coming from on high and from the top that shows that there's been, that there's not just thought put behind what might come next, but that there's action and that there's accountability for those kinds of things. And there are no easy solutions, of course, but just to say that we are also, as much as you're looking to us for stories and for ideas, that we're also looking to you. So to think about this partnership in a really important way, especially when so many folks are feeling so vulnerable. So thanks for the time.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you. And I will venture to say that, yes, we have spent the time today listening, and, we asked for ways into the conversation to include individuals telling their stories and sharing ideas. We asked for a call for folks to call attention to resources that may or may not be known. And we've seen that has begun to be addressed right here during this very session. We've talked about exploring possible solutions for the challenges raised. And we talked about discussing some constraints we face in meeting all needs. So I will say that I believe you can expect that we will take what we've heard today and work towards solutions in a mutual way, in a collaborative way. I won't say that I, in my role as provost, am prepared to provide definitive answers at this moment, because I've treated this, of course, as a listening session. And as you alluded to, many of the issues raised are certainly complex ones. And I say that again, not to make an excuse, but just in recognition that we realize that a next step having heard more, having had the stories illustrate the challenges, the stresses, the uncertainties, the difficulties, it means that we're closer to next steps that would involve working collaboratively on those solutions that we will be able to manage to support.
Any additional questions or comments in the chat? I haven't seen. Melissa Rock offered some information on a fundraising campaign. I'm sorry, was that University of Oregon, Melissa? Yeah. They were able to run a fundraising campaign where they raised $50,000 for almost sort of like a caregiver crisis fund, right? She posted a link in the chat about that program. And Kirsten has a hand raised.
Just a quick comment, and it does go back to what Nancy raised earlier. In just thinking about this as a labor issue, I think it's important that we also see it as part of our anti-racist commitment. I was complaining at some point about how challenging this has been, and a BIPOC friend of mine said, you know what, Black women have been doing this for centuries. And I think that it bears repeating here, that we have to see this as all connected. That's it.
Thank you, Kirsten. I want to give an opportunity for anyone else who has not spoken to consider doing so. We are getting close to the end of our scheduled time for this gathering. And one of the things that we talked about in some exchange of information in terms of getting, planning to have this when I was talking with Melissa and Meg, for example, back and forth. We said we hoped it would be a rich conversation. So that I think it has been, but it is a precursor to continued conversation and work to discern those various strategies that might help address the multi-layered challenges that are part of our COVID-19 affected lives now. So I do thank, and of course you're still on the screen, Kirsten, so thank you for being forthright. Maybe you didn't know that, but you are. I think you're still seen as the speaker. But I just call attention to you because you exemplified perhaps more than most, but I think others did as well. But maybe you're the poster person today for having been willing to express something that showed, that risked vulnerability. So we appreciate that and the element that added to the conversation. For those of us who are no longer directly involved in the care of young children or in the care of elders, I know that what I heard from you today and what others have heard brought those realities closer to the center of our attention. And when we work and plan around this, it means something to have heard directly from you the examples of what you are facing and have been contending with. And of course, you'll have to forgive me for using this as a segue before we end, it's 2:55 by my computer clock, to additional dialogue we are having. So what I want to do before I go to this next thing is, if there are no other hands raised right now, no other comments or any desire to share further in the moment, I would like to thank everyone for your participation. So for the letter that led, that was the spark for this particular conversation that is helping to move us along, and to everyone who took part, who came to listen, who came and shared. So thank you all, and thank you both to both Melissa and to Meg, and to others who brought a lot of information and who helped us with some realization of, some of the things that we can do in the more immediate term as we work on the more complicated things that do require more of us to address collectively. So many thanks. And I want to call your attention to the student check-in town hall with campus and faculty that we have this Thursday from 4:45 to 6. At this town hall, students are going to no doubt share more about the interests and concerns expressed in their open letter to the faculty. If you want to revisit that letter prior to the Thursday town hall, it was posted on October 22nd, and you can Google it and get to it, I think, fairly easily. So I thought it useful to mention that here.
And before we sign off, I would like to add my thanks and appreciation to everyone for bringing forth your ideas, your concerns, your suggestions and strategies for how we might move ahead on all of these issues. I appreciate it a lot and wish everyone well and good health and safety in the coming weeks.
Yes, thank you. It's week 10 for all who haven't been counting like some of us. Well, thank you, everyone. Some of us are going to just stay on the line in case anyone, we're not going to leave abruptly, but I think we've come to the conclusion of today's forum.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.